Hi, welcome to the Entrepreneurial Odyssey. I'm your host, Rob Ratliff, and in this podcast, we talk to entrepreneurs about their journey, their successes, their failures, what some kind of things that they've had to overcome and how they overcome those, and then just try to find good insights to help you grow your business. And today we have Sarah Johnson. She is the founder of Content First Design, and she has over 20 years experience in this. And so I'm excited to have you and talk about content today. So welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Rob, for having me.
My pleasure. So tell us a little bit about what your business is, what you're doing right now.
Sure. Content First Design is focused on UX and marketing, putting content first and creating clarity and meaning upstream so that by the time we get down to UX, we're not asked to fix something that's way past its point of relevancy. And so we have two frameworks. One is for UX and one is for marketing. And it's about establishing clarity and meaning from the beginning of a project rather than waiting to the end, whether it's print or digital.
Great. And what got you started in that?
That's a good question. I started teaching at Bentley University Content First Design and their not Content First Design, Content Strategy in their user experience program. And the way that I wanted to teach it was very hands-on, and I had people do content research and then get into building a site, reworking a site using content only. And after about a year of doing that, I realized what I was teaching was content first design. And I thought, I should write a book about this.
Right. Yeah. It's
So I
catchy.
wrote an outline and dug in and realized I had a lot of thoughts about it. And one of the things with the book that I realized, I was driving home on the highway and I realized, who wants to hear from Sarah Johnson? Who's she?
Hmm.
So I decided to make it sort of a community thing by including sections from other experts. So I have a section called From the Experts that people have weighed in on, and sort of you get different points of view about why it's important to put content first or not. And I love hearing from people about that. So yeah, that's how I got into it. Once I started looking at it from a user experience point of view, I extrapolated it to look at it organizationally. Like where does this lack of meaning in UX begin? And you can trace it right back, to
So go into a little bit more about that. When you're saying content and UX, so UX is user experience. So when we're talking about content and the user experience, I mean, a lot of people when we talk about content, and especially in marketing, and it's all about content is king. You've heard that, and content is all about getting your voice out there, but also has a lot to do with search engine optimization and things like that. But talk about a little bit more about how it ties into the user experience.
I think a digital experience is a conversation with a user. And how can you have the conversation if you don't know what the content of the conversation is? It's like trying to have a movie without a script, a friend of mine once said. And I think that to research and understand users and how they talk, think, and feel, to understand what we need to communicate with them before we start building screens so that words drive and collaborate with UX designers to create an experience that's really intuitive for users and not such a struggle to understand what it means.
And content is, when we're talking about content, we're not just talking about like blog posts or web pages necessarily. Talk a little bit about when you're going to set up a content strategy, what are all the bases that you try to cover? In what order do you want to put it out there? What's kind of the flow of that content and how it's put out into the out for the users to consume, and why you would do one thing first, followed by another thing. Can you talk a little bit about that strategy?
Sure, I have two frameworks. One is for marketing and one is for UX. And I'll talk about the UX one first because that's where our conversation has been. For the UX, I do what's called the double diamond, where we do discovery, definition, design, and we deliver. So the idea is that we establish the product and get all the teams aligned on what we're up to. Then we do extensive research through a content lens, looking at users and how they talk, I've mentioned that. And then we do the actual writing for the page, working in collaboration with the UX designers, and then we deliver, test, 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 and iterate.
Mm-hmm.
And for marketing, we do something similar, which is we diagnose the disconnect, which means we look at where things are breaking down, where messaging is breaking down, where teams aren't aligned, and where there's a lack of clarity. The next thing we do is we operationalize this content first framework. Then we do the writing, rewrite for impact, and then we test, tweak, iterate, deliver. So those are the major components of a content strategy from my point of view, from a content first point of view.
And when you're designing content, it obviously depends on what the business is, what the business is doing, right? So when you're developing a content strategy, obviously things will change in content design. Should it be more text-based articles, press releases, or should it be more video, social proof, user-generated content, things like that? What's the process that you use to try to determine what's going to be the best type of content for a specific business that you're working with?
Sure, I think it's a combination. It's always a matter of whether it's marketing or UX, walking that line between business requirements and user needs and trying to figure out what's going to best reach the user, what's going to best serve the user. And if we're serving the user to the best of our abilities, the chances of us reaching our business goals go up. So the idea of the business is to be of service to the user. So I think that that's a good guideline for deciding what type of content is going to be helpful. Like blog content is good for one thing, whereas social proof is good for another. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at different, whether you're serving like a plumber or are you trying to sell a product, like a physical product on Amazon or TikTok or something like that.
Right.
There's so much that has to go into determining what kind of content is best used for those kinds of things. Can you tell me a time when you were kind of struggling to figure out maybe what the best form of content for a particular company is and why that was? Or, maybe that didn't happen, maybe you haven't had that. But has there ever been a time when you're looking at a company, you're going, okay, what is going to be the best content? It's kind of hard to place because there's kind of a very nichey kind of an organization or problem to solve. And how did you decide what that content should be, and then how did it go?
Sure. The first example that comes to mind is my own website for content first design. And that's a very niche business, obviously. So deciding where we needed to explain what we do versus what our services were versus how we work with you. And what do we put in blog posts? How do we establish social proof? How do we establish credibility? Should this be a post on LinkedIn? Should it be on the blog? Should it be something we talk about directly to customers and our audience? Or should it be something we include on the website that everyone can look at? So those decisions, again, come down to what's going to best reach the user that they can understand. And is it something that's fixed that should be on the website, or is it something that can be temporary, like on a social media platform? I use LinkedIn. And with blog posts, is it something as opposed to a LinkedIn post? Blog posts, they're perpetual. They stick around. People can go and revisit them. So it really does come down to, for me, how to best serve the user. And I find that by doing that, I get the most engagement in what I'm trying to do.
Sure. And it's interesting too because the user experience and the user interface often go hand in hand, especially on a website where
Mhm.
how is the user supposed to interact with the application? I know you mentioned that you co-authored your book, and I think in there you talk about a banking application that you worked with and some content design there. Tell us a little bit about how that came to be, how you got involved, with that project, or what how she utilized content first design in order for that banking application. Just tell us a little bit about that story. How did it go? How did you meet? What got you started? How did it turn out? Would love to hear that.
Sure, sure. That was great. I wanted a case study for the book and I didn't want to write it. And I was managing a team at CVS and I had a wonderful content strategist on the team. She was great. And I asked her if she wanted to participate in the book. So she invented a bank called Title Bank, and we included that in the case study and started off with a website that needed a serious revamp. And through implementing the process and kind of going in the book, here's this aspect of the process, here's how we implement it with the case study, we went through and designed a whole new site. And by the end of the book, you see how the process works and where it gets you from point A to point B. And you're like, wow, point B is so much better.
Right.
But she did a great job of illustrating the process in action.
Very cool.
Yeah, and it was great too because she helped, she read through the book and had some editorial feedback. Her name is Shannon Geis. And I think she's still at CVS. She had some great editorial feedback, and it was great to just have someone else in it with you. I mean, it totally takes a village to write a book.
Mhm.
And I had a wonderful editor at XML Press, Richard Hamilton. Just getting people's perspective outside of my own head was very helpful.
Well, yeah, I mean, because there's a lot of research that goes into it, plus the time. I mean, writing a book is not easy to do. Definitely takes some time. And your book, I believe, is just for sale on Amazon, as I'm sure
Mhm.
other places as well. I can put a link in the description, so if people want to buy the book, that'll be there.
Sure.
Help them with that. I think that's going to be very helpful. So now I've talked about what you do, why you do it, how you do it. Let's go back to talking about your journey in this business. It says that you have 20 years experience. Now I don't know, you weren't in business for that. You didn't have your own business for those
Yeah.
20. When did you decide I'm going to start an entrepreneurial lifestyle and start my own business?
I think what happened was I got laid off at CVS, which was no offense, CVS, but it was great because it gave me a ton of time to write the book. So I wrote the book. And once I had the book and I had the framework, I just thought I believe in it so heartily, and so passionately that this process really works and it is important and you need to do it, that I decided to offer it as a service and that I would do consulting around it. And then I started to work with a PR company and some different people, and my ideas started to extrapolate to become organizational, and look at meaning at scale. The business was interesting because I started off thinking I was doing one thing, and through expanding my thinking and learning and learning and learning how this process could apply across an organization, I've been pivoting. And I would say I've been steadily pivoting since it's January now, late January. Since September, I've had a few pivots in how I'm approaching what I'm doing. And the meaning at scale idea is I wrote another book that hopefully will come out in 2026, maybe
Nice.
2027, early 2027. But that's called Meaning at Scale. So I've expanded what I'm doing. And it's interesting just talking to you now, I'm thinking like, wow, I wonder where it will expand to after that. And once you jump into these things, you don't know where they're going. They take on a life of their own. And that's something I've learned. And it's been a challenge to like adjust and grow with it. And it's also been exciting and fun. Um, I don't know. I love what I do.
That's awesome. What was the moment where you were in this, you're in this process, you started this business. At what point in time did you say, okay, this is a viable workflow. This is going to work. I know that this company can be successful. Because I know a lot of times as an entrepreneur, you're just kind of hoping, hey, that things are going to work out. But when did you know, okay, this is going to work for me? I can do this.
I think I believed in it, because I'd written the book. I just had so much passion about it. I really believed in it. And I think I believed in it without, you don't know what you don't know. So I think I believed in it without knowing a lot of stuff that would come down the road and teach me. And I started off wanting to teach and offer workshops. And now that I'm looking at what I'm doing, I'm really doing consulting work with companies. For instance, the company I'm working with next month, I go in and give a keynote about content first, and then they do a couple of workshops hands-on with the teams to implement the process. And that's the type of work I'm doing now, is the consulting work, and to understand where the real needs were and what was going to help customers and clients and users the most. Yeah, I don't even remember the question, but that's my long-winded
When did
answer.
you know this business was going to be viable and work for you?
I think incrementally I've become more and more confident, but it's taken, the more I go through the process of pivoting, I get insecure, then I get really confident. And the more I pivot, the more I realize, like, wow, I'm getting closer and closer to really building this into something that's more than viable, you know.
Yeah. Well, and I know as an entrepreneur, you're always having to pivot, you're always having to adjust, you're always having to, and again, yeah, the customer really drives what you do. You think as an entrepreneur you get to drive it, but it's actually the opposite. The customers are really the ones that drive where you go in business because their demands are the ones you're trying to meet. And
Exactly.
it's a lot different, I think, than business owners believe. I'm just going to go into business and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it this way and people are going to love me. It may not work like that.
Not so
Sometimes,
much.
yeah. What was there a point in your entrepreneurial journey where you just thought, man, this isn't gonna work?
I mean, many times. I think when I don't know if it's a PR company, I got someone to work with me around messaging. And I think in the middle of that, I had a meltdown, crying to the PR guy, like, yeah, this is not going to work. I can't do this. And he talked me off the ledge. He was like part therapist, part PR person. He was great. And they really helped me put together messaging and processes that gave me confidence and helped me feel like I was on really solid ground between what they offered me and what I offered myself. They got me, and their confidence in me and other people's confidence in me also helps me. People think it's a no-brainer, and I'm like, "Whoa, you have no idea." But then things get momentum and get going, and it's all good.
That's amazing, and I have my own marketing agency, and a lot of my clients end up playing therapist too as well. Recently, I've got someone just, I don't think I'm gonna do this. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't. It's just like, whoa. Here's what you got to do. First thing you got to do is you got to make a decision. What is it you want to do? And I think that so many times people fail in business because they're just like a deer in the headlights. What do I do? Do I this or do that? I don't know. Pick one and go for it, and then we'll go from
Right,
there.
right. It's interesting. I'm
Yeah.
glad I'm not the only one, Rob.
Nope, you're definitely not the only one. But when we're working with people like we do, oftentimes that's how it's going to be. And
Mhm.
even business to business isn't really truly business to business because it's your business working with more people in a different business. It's always
Right, right,
always
right.
about people. And you talked about that kind of the beginning of this podcast where you're talking about it's really about the people, their concerns, the things that they're trying to get help with and how you're going to help them, and that's what the content is all about, is solving their problems. Do you ever, well, I'm not gonna say do you ever because I know it's all the time, but tell me a time when, or either a time, a story that comes to mind, or basically when you bring on a new company and they are trying to do X or sell X, how do you identify or help them identify the problem that they're really solving so you can create the content around that and justify what it is that they do?
The problem that they're really solving, I think there's a bunch of ways that we do that. One of them is there's actually something I talk about called a problem solution workshop. Like what is the problem? What are we trying to solve for? And we look at metrics, we look at whatever user research we have, we look at where people are dropping off an experience, and we figure out what is the problem. And that evolves. The more research we do, the more we learn about what the problem is. The other way we do that is with marketing. It's more like diagnosing the disconnect, like finding where meaning breaks down and where messaging breaks down, and to hone in on where the lack of alignment is. That's the problem we have to solve with marketing. And
Hmm.
UX too, to a certain degree.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. So tell us about a another client situation where you saw a big change in what they were doing, and then after working with you, what happened and how they improved.
That's a great question. I worked with a financial services organization that worked with design thinking and leaned toward content first, because when you do empathy mapping and conversation mapping and exercises like that, you learn so much about how the user talks and thinks and what they feel about what they're doing through analyzing drop off places in the we did a lot of financial transactions. So where did people drop off in the transaction before they hit submit? We want them to hit the big button, the big green button at the bottom. And where did they drop off before that? Step one, step two, step three, and to really hone in on what the content issues were there. And when we were able to do that and simplify, simplify, simplify this complicated financial jargon and processes for people, the submission rates just exponentially rose. And that was just so gratifying to see and to be a part of.
Yeah, so making things simple to understand, easier to know. I mean, I guess a lot of times too, especially when you're talking about subscriptions, payment methods, things like
Mhm.
that, asking for a payment method or credit card right up front, you're kind of like, well, what is this for? Why am I paying?
Exactly. And that reassurance to help people understand why they're doing what they're doing and reassuring them that they're doing it properly and how their information is going to be used. Those were things that we really learned were critical to people feeling secure enough to continue to the next step.
Yeah, that's amazing. So tell us a little bit about a time in your entrepreneurial journey where just like the best day you ever had. Because of your business, not because of something else, but because something happened in your business, you just, well, this is so worth doing what I do.
So many things. One fun thing that happened really recently was that I got my own podcast and someone's sponsoring it for me. And it's the Content First podcast, which will launch in a few weeks. And just excited. Like, you know how fun it is to meet all these different people and pick their brains on what they're doing. And that was a really gratifying day that made me feel like, wow, people get it. It's valuable. We get to talk to everyone about it. And it's a way for me to distribute my ideas more broadly. And like I've said several times, I'm very passionate about content first. I really believe that it's the best approach, and that establishing meaning at the beginning is critical. So I think that was a very exciting day, and that's not, I guess it's sort of an accomplishment. It felt like a gift from the heavens.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for me, I've always wanted to do podcasts, but that was before podcast for podcast. We're talking like, I remember 30 years ago, I was working in a bike shop or something. I just thought, wouldn't it be so fun to go talk to these businesses, record it on video, and then just talk to them about how they got started and what they do, what they love about it, what they hate about it, wow, what kind of customers they're looking for, how they got, just all that stuff. And then podcasting came out, and I had, I think, I don't remember, I think, yeah, I think it's back in 2020 when I started the idea of this podcast because I had been let go from a job, COVID layoffs, all that kind of stuff. And I said, hey, this is my time to get out there and start doing podcasts. And it really is fun to do. I mean, it's so neat to meet people and ask these questions. And have you, when you talk about your services, everything from like the UX services you're talking about to the marketing services, tell us a little bit more about what you do first for the UX services, and then we'll talk a little bit more about what you do for the marketing services.
There's so many services for UX. I can help implement a content first process for their development of a digital product. I can go in and, like with this company I'm working with in February, go in and do a keynote that educates all of UX about what content first is, because you really do need buy-in from everybody. And once people understand how it's to their benefit as well, and that the process doesn't exclude them because it's called content first, that's easier to get people to get on board. The other thing is the workshops. Those are great to go into a company and like workshop a project that they're in the process of doing. Other services include, a wide range of workshops and teaching opportunities, speaking, audits. I do a lot of website audits and implement upgrades and changes for conversions. And for marketing services, I go in and I help them establish meaning at the highest level and help them to stay aligned all the way down the road so that the company is putting out one message and not three different messages, or the same message said three different ways. Like, customers look for consistency. They don't want you to keep changing the story. We want to know what it is, how we get it, what is it going to cost, and we want consistency. That builds brand trust. So I help people establish that trust.
So the marketing services aren't necessarily about, hey, we're going to run your ads here, run your ads there. It's more, what's the message? How do we stay consistent? And let's say that I am a business that will just, I don't want to say a specific type of business because I want to be more general. So my listeners are listening to this and saying, okay, how can I figure out my messaging and how can I figure out this content first strategy, which again comes back to the messaging? What is your advice to help business owners to determine what their message should be? Because there's so many messages that you can put out there. And I guess a message doesn't have to just be that we're the best or that we're have the best customer service. I mean, it can be several things. We're good at what we do and we have good customer service, but what's the best way to sit down and just say, okay, I'm a business and I like this, I like what I'm hearing, but how do I really determine what my message should be? What's your advice for them?
Well, this is what I learned from my PR company, is that you need to establish what differentiates you from the competition. Like, what is your key differentiator? And for me, it was stopping message misfires to help you get rid of content and AI confusion. And AI scales, content needs to have that shared meaning all the way through, or the AI will put out gobbledygook. And just having that message, getting that message about my clarity, what I really do, like what is my, if I had to hone in on the one thing I do really, really well that separates me from other people, that's going to be my message. Your key
That,
differentiator.
that's really, really good advice. And speaking
Well, I
of
learned it
AI,
from somebody else, but ears open.
yeah, right. Ears open and, disseminate the truths out there that help other people. And that's fantastic. So I really like that. I mean, that should be, that helps me. Like I'll go, hey, what is the message? What is the differentiator? And how do I put that out there? Right. Because there can
Right,
be
and
a
it's
million
hard, I
plumbing
think, to
companies.
hone in on it.
Yeah. A million marketing companies, a million electricians,
Right,
bakeries, there's all kinds of, so it's like, okay, what makes us different, unique? Why should you buy from us? And then of course, you have to fulfill. You have to do a good job of that part. So you get them back. So the message has to be your uniqueness, but then you also have to fulfill on what you promise, obviously.
absolutely.
So speaking of AI, the ability to create content using AI has just skyrocketed. Of course,
Mhm.
content everywhere. There's a business that I was working with. And one of the services that I do as a marketing agency is search engine optimize websites using various keywords, location tags, those kinds of things so that you come up on the first page of Google and Bing and all those other ones for what you do. Right. And that's your basic search engine optimization. What I found was that we were working with this one company and no longer did they need someone like me to build these pages about specific services in specific areas because they could use AI and they could say, I need a page about each one of these subjects for each one of these locations. And they, with a click of a button, they could create 200 pages with all the location information, even ways to identify. So, for example, I'm up here in Logan, Utah, Cache Valley area, right?
Yeah,
So when people think of Cache Valley, they think of Bear Lake is up kind of this way. They think of, some of the art centers and things like that. And so the AI would even be able to go in and generate content about the area so that Google will look at that and say, okay, this isn't just mocked up kind of, mention the city, but actually nuances about the city that Google could say, okay, this is a real page that has real good content. So these AI tools are just generating hundreds of pages out there. What would be your take on AI, how it's affecting the content that's being delivered and disseminated out there? And how do you fight against that to make sure that you can deliver enough content to get in front of enough people while you're fighting with other businesses that can create hundreds of videos and hundreds of articles every week, now with AI? How do you compete against that?
Well, so all those hundreds of things, there's a lot of noise out there. So, like, to me, the question is, how do you cut through the noise? And I think the way that you cut through the noise is to stick to your message and to stick to your business model and speak from your core beliefs and not be just taking what AI says and spewing it. I think that it needs a lot of human interaction. And that's whether you train a GPT or teach your AI, your brand voice, your tone, how you speak, how you want to write. I
Training
think,
it to sound like you, have your core values, have your message.
yeah,
I don't think a lot of people know that you can train your own GPT.
you have to.
So let's talk a little bit about that process. Take us, kind of guide us through the process a little bit. I've done it a few times, but for those who are listening who have not done that, who didn't even know you could do that, talk a little bit about what that means, how you do it, and why it's so important.
One of the things I did was I fed it a lot of my own writing. I fed it my brand and voice. I talked to it in my own language. I took a workshop with this woman, Lauren Tickner, who teaches how to create your own GPT. And she had interview questions, and you answer the interview questions. So you basically have the AI interview you, and you answer the questions. And I can't think of all of the aspects of her method, but it was called YOU-AI, U-AI, and it's an acronym for something, but I bet if you looked up U-AI, Lauren Tickner, you could find it. And I used her methodology and then added some twists of my own, like by uploading my own writing and giving it my website, like teaching it about me and my business. And
So
it's
you
great.
Yeah, so you train it. This is who I am. This is what I offer. This is what I sound like. These are the kinds of words that I use. And then when it creates an article or builds an article, it's going to sound like you and have the link.
Right, but you have to read it, and I have to yell at it a lot because it does things that aren't me. Like AI wants to write these short, punchy sentences stacked on top of each other. And I'm like, dude, I do not write like that. I'm a narrative writer. And so I wind up taking what the AI does and rewriting, but I look at it as a collaborative tool, not as a be all and end all. And I think when we get into using it as a be all and end all, even if you make your own GPT, no matter how good it is, it's going to be noise. You're going to be writing like everybody else. You're going to sound like everybody else. And you really need to, until we can create a GPT that's, freaking perfect, we need to be on top of it, and look at it as a collaborator and not a worker bee.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I was watching or listening, reading an article or something about the large language model and how it's kind of the first step. The next step is going to be general intelligence and able to actually think on its own, not just build on a large. It just,
Terrifying.
this word is expected after that word and that kind of
Right.
thing. But then it pointed out that a lot of for what we do and kind of how to explain the large language model versus the more of a general intelligence AI is that when we go to an event and we socialize, as
Hmm.
humans, we tend to operate mostly on a large language model.
Hmm.
So even us as humans, it's just what's expected to come next, and then we stack words on top of each other that align up. So, for example, I meet you at an event. Hi, my name's Rob. That's what you expect me to say. That's what's expected to be said. And then you're
Right.
going to say, Hi, I'm Sarah. And then I'm going to say, right? And so it's like for the most part, when we're
What
not
do you
thinking,
do, Rob?
what do you do? And it's just that, and then, you can do that in your sleep. Okay, maybe not your sleep. The idea is that it's just, you're operating on this, words stacked on top of each other. What's expected to come next, what you're going to say, and then they're going to say this, and I'm going to say that. And I thought that was fascinating to think about that. And so when I go to networking events now, I think, okay, how can I get away from being an LLM and actually talking and getting to know someone when you think about it?
Oh, that's so you mean to sound unique and like your own person?
Yeah, when you're so not even just unique in your messaging for your brand, but what would you say that's unexpected that
You know
is
what's
not
so
just an LLM?
cool? I just had this company reach out to me called Remarkable Prompts, and they actually give you prompts for having an interesting story or conversation, if I'm understanding what they do correctly.
Hmm.
So it's funny because I took it as remarkable prompts. I thought it would be prompts for AI, but it's for storytelling and conversation. And it's just interesting that you brought that up because I was wondering, like, what context would we use this in and why is it important? And you just nailed it. So thank you.
Right. Yeah. It is funny when we just, for the most part, we operate, even our day-to-day activities, our sales process, when we deliver a sales presentation, we're, as humans, we're operating mostly on a large language model. Just here's what I do, here's the things, and and it is just funny. And so then you step back and you look at the world and go, are we all just in an AI? We're just all language model, little
That's really
personified.
funny.
So I thought it was kind of funny. Anyway, yeah. So getting back to the real world, we uh, we've talked about the marketing, user experience, messaging, branding, why it's important, how content first takes a role in that. I think there's a lot of things we've covered in here. If there was some advice, more advice, final advice that you could give to the people listening, and I can't believe we're going on 45 minutes already. The time has just flown by.
That's fun. Yeah.
But talk to us a little bit about, just take a minute to talk to the audience about the most important things that they need to do, look at to really have a content first mindset, and so that they can take what they've learned here. Just kind of summarize it all up for us.
Sure. I think to have a content first mindset, you need to be willing to do the due diligence and really look at the user's experience through a content first lens or through a content lens. And I think in terms of entrepreneurship, which is what we're talking about, I think I would say don't be afraid to pivot. Like you're going to start off with one idea and it will evolve and you will have to pivot. And you might be afraid or not want to change, change is scary, but don't be afraid to pivot and know your key differentiator.
Yeah, that's great. Very, very good advice. All right, so we'll put links in the description for your book, your website. Are there any other links or anything, Instagram handles that you want us to, how do people get in touch with you?
Sarah at contentfirstdesign.com.
All right, perfect. And that's SARAH at contentfirstdesign.com. Perfect. Well, I do appreciate all your time and all of your insights and walking us through that whole
Right
process.
back at you. That was fun.
Yeah, it is fun. All
Thank
right.
you.
Well, I'm going to end the recording here. And if you just stick around a minute, then we'll finish up. And to all those listening, if you are running a business and looking at marketing user experience, I definitely recommend that you talk to Sarah, find a little bit more about what she does, see how she can help you. Because it really is about the messaging. And so many businesses fail just because they don't differentiate themselves and they cause so much friction in the buying process that it's hard for people to understand what they're paying for, what they're going to get, and that's something that Sarah can help you with. So thank you, Sarah, and we
Thank
will
you.
have to follow up again with you here in a little bit.
Thank you.
You're